Okay, well, I wanted to do the video earlier, but I guess we're doing it now. So this is it, 10 things that I like about this truck. I did the 5 things that I hate about it. Sorry. This is 10 things I like about it. So number 1 is, I love the way these trucks look. They started this body style in 1994 and pretty much carried the same general idea of it up until 2001 or 2002. Then in either 02 or 03, they switched it up to like the first generation Hemi, Dodges. Before this, they were the older, like a 93 to 72. They were really similar trucks. Not similar to this, but similar to each other. A lot more boxy and everything. They did do some changes up, with the grill and a little bit minor changes here and there, but a lot of the parts were interchangeable. So it makes it nice for working on them. These things, they didn't make the same body style for 21 years. And also had a few changes, more mechanical changes than appearance. So it's kind of hard to swap out some parts on this generation of Dodge, but that's not a big deal. They're still a damn good looking truck. I got my list here. Okay, yeah, second thing. This one's 2-wheel drive, so it's going to ride a little bit smoother in a 4-wheel drive, independent suspension versus the whole straight axle or twin I-beam. I forget what exactly it was that the 4-wheel drives of this generation had. But they're, you hit a bump, you're going to feel it. They are an older truck. But really, they're not that bad. Compared to my 87 Dodge, which was also a 2-wheel drive. And that thing didn't ride bad either. But this definitely is a bit smoother than that. Part of that, which on my videos on what I said I didn't like about it, I mentioned the steering wheel. Yeah, the steering wheel. Don't really like the spokes a whole lot. Don't really like that right there. I don't know. I wish something was a little bit different about that. Maybe some kind of little bit of padding there. It's kind of a mess in here. It's a work truck. But no, seats actually pretty comfortable. They slide around pretty good and it's not hard. The back seat also a mess, but the back of the cab's actually got a decent bit of room. For example, like up front here, I am about 6 foot, give or take a few inches, and about like 185, 190 pounds. And my younger brother, he's like 5'7" or so. And I've got plenty of room up here. I got plenty of room to move my feet around and everything. And he can sit, and the seat's not even all the way back. So he can sit right behind me and be fine. If you're like 6'4", 6'5", you'll have no problem being comfortable in this truck. This thing's got a lot of room to move around in. And not only that, the seats are pretty comfortable. You can get a comfortable seating position. So that's, one thing that's really nice for some of the longer road trips, like highway driving or anything like that. And cruise control works. Come on. Trying to get my list back out. Not that I really have any specific order that I wanted to go in. Oh, yeah. So number 3 thing that I like about this truck, I'm just going to close my door here. I like the gauges. I don't really know why. I can't answer. It's not that there's really anything special about them. Just like the way they look better. On the Chevys, you got, the light up things, which this is always wrong, basically. There it says it's in park, but when you're in drive, it says you're in neutral, and when you're in first gear, it says you're in second. The linkage gets a little bit fuckered up, but the shit still works. No, I don't know, like in the Chevys, it's like the tack starts way down here, and then in some of them it goes to 6, but some of them it goes up to 7, and it's like it ends right there. It's all like fucking crooked and lopsided looking shit. And then they got the, that shit is down here, and that all lights up, and the bulbs go out, and not that it really matters. If you if you need the indicator to tell you if you're in drive or reverse, you shouldn't be driving a fucking vehicle. That's just my personal opinion. But yeah, so there's that. Not really any big deal. Definitely not like a deal breaker. Yeah, don't buy this truck because I don't like the look of the gauges. That'd be ridiculous. But I don't know. They just seem pretty symmetrical and everything. I don't know. I like the setup. So there's that. Another thing I like about these trucks are the parts are fairly cheap. You know, the light switches and general interior parts. You go to a junkyard, a lot of the time they just give you that, you know, these knobs or whatever fall off, the dash and all that. It is kind of a cheaply made console. But I don't know. I can't bitch about them that much. They're a lot better than the 98 to 01 or 02 style, in my opinion. Just the way they look and built with better parts. On the later ones, this gets all cracked up there and massive fucking holes that like come all the way over here. Basically, your whole dash falls apart. And these ones down south where it gets really hot, I guess that happens a little bit every now and then. But yeah, it's really not that bad on these ones. Pop the hood. So, number 4 is parts are really fairly cheap for these things. Not quite like a Chevy 350. Parts are super cheap for them. But they're a lot cheaper than they would be for some 3.5 fucking EcoBoost or a Triton motor. And both of them engines, not only are parts expensive, but they're unreliable as fuck. And, you know, you got a lot better chance of them breaking down. This right here, which that's not really that great of a system. I don't know if you guys saw my review on that. I'm not real happy with it, but it gets the job done better than the original breather box did. It was like $49 or something for this thing. It's really not that bad. Especially for upgrading. You can find parts to redo the whole entire engine and better pistons, better everything. And, you know, like all the older trucks, the parts really aren't that expensive. So that's one thing I like about them. And these really aren't that hard to work on. I mean, most of these wires and cables, you know, move around and shit. Which some of them, it almost seems like they should be a little bit tighter than they are. But it is what it is. But compared to some other things, you could spend a lot more time working on shit. And like I said, you know, they're reliable. The transmission, the 46RH, obviously that's not the best transmission in the world, but the 46RE, that's the bad one. The RHs really aren't that bad of a transmission. Yeah, you can't see none of that down there. I'm not crawling behind the fucking thing either, underneath it. I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. Too sore and fat and old. So yeah, number 6, reliability. And the 4-wheel drives, the suspensions and the front axle and all that, they have some front end issues. But on the 2-wheel drives, not really so much. And in the 4-wheel drives, it's not terrible. And that all, you know, goes back to the fairly cheap parts and not too hard to work on. It's really not that hard to upgrade the front ends in the 4-wheel drive 90s Dodges. Number 7 thing I like about this, and this goes for both the 360s, which is what this is, 5.9 liter 360 V8. They're a 90 degree engine, I believe. That looks like a 90. Because I know in the 60s they did the whole like 60 degree wedge engines. Pretty sure these are 90s. They look like a 90. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're a 90. Anyway, that's besides the point. They make good power. This year, the 95s, I believe they made 200, and there were 2 different 360s they made in the same year. Not really 2 different 360s, but a little bit different variation. I'm not really sure what it was, but I believe the one 360 made, and this isn't an exact quote, I think they made 230 horsepower at like 4,400 RPM or something, and 330 foot-pounds of torque at 2,700, 2,750. And then the little bit more powerful version, that made like 245 horsepower and 345 foot-pounds of torque. And what that did is it just kind of stretched out the power band a little bit, because the version that makes 345 foot-pounds of torque, that makes that power at, I think, 2,900. So where you would get your peak torque in one of the other engines at 2,700 RPM, no matter which engine you have, you're still making about that 330 foot-pounds of torque. Difference is in the little bit less powerful version is, you know, it holds that torque curve right up to about 3,000, then starts to slowly drop off until you hit about 3,700 RPM, then it really starts to drop off, where the more powerful version actually at 2,700 RPM is not peak torque. The peak torque actually climbs a little bit more to like 3,000, 2,900, 3,000-ish RPM, and then that really starts to drop off at 4 grand. Which one is which? I'm not really sure. This being the 3/4 ton, I would think that this would have the little bit more powerful version, because like I said, where I'm at anyways, and I know in some of the comments on my one video, y'all said that the V8s are the most common for the 3/4 tons, and then like the Cummins, and then the V10. Where we're at in Michigan, and anywhere in Michigan that I've ever been, I see way more V10s and Cummins for the 3/4 ton trucks than the V8s. So, being that, I don't know, from what I've noticed, the V8s being more the uncommon engine in these trucks, I would think that they'd put the more powerful 360 in. But I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong on all of it as far as which variation was the most commonly sold in the 3/4 ton. And this could be the less powerful 360. Then as far as the 318s go, they're just the same damn engine, different bore, different stroke. This is just a big brother to that. They're both super reliable. I know the older LA block engines, haven't really heard as many stories about the Magnums doing it, but a lot of them LA block 318s and 360s, they'll hit 600,000-700,000 miles without needing to rebuild. If you don't beat the shit out of them, and if you're really good at maintaining them, they'll go a long time. And the 318s are pretty powerful too. They're closer to 210 horsepower and like 310 foot-pounds of torque. Same thing right around, max horsepower, like 4,400 RPM, and peak torque about, I think the 318s do it at like 25 or 26, so like 100 or 200 RPM lower, which it really doesn't, it don't really matter. Honestly, if you got a 318 and that's straight up not enough power for you, the 360 is not going to be enough power for you either, really, in my opinion. When you're pulling a trailer, you don't notice the difference. You couldn't tell what's under the hood. Now, when you're completely empty and you put it to the floor, you'll know which one's the 360 truck. When you're empty, they do seem to have a bit more get up and go than the 318s do. But as far as pulling and doing work, like what you would buy a work truck for, I've never really been able to tell the difference. If you have a 318 and you're thinking of upgrading to a 360, honestly, I'd keep your 318 and maybe put lower gears in it. If you're, like running 355s in a 318 and it's not enough power for you and you want the 360, try throwing a set of 373s or 410s for your final drive ratio and your ring and pinion, and get a little bit more of that torque and see how that helps you. Of course, then you're running into the challenge where at 55 mile an hour, you're running a higher RPM than you once were, and it can get to the point where you're running a higher RPM than what your torque range is. If you're doing 4,000 RPM or whatever, okay, yeah, you've got really low gears, but your engine don't make a whole lot of power way up there, and so that's just about fucking pointless. So that kind of covered both 7 and 8. A lot of power. Like I stated, the on number 8 on my list is just the overall engine family. That's pretty much what we just talked about. Number 9 is, I like the way these fucking things sound. Maybe not so much with the stock exhaust, but they sound really good with a set of glass packs. They sound really good with like a Dynamax or any kind of turbo muffler. I have a Thrush welded on this one, which I'm not going to crawl underneath the truck, but I've actually got a spare Thrush welded muffler that I took off that IDI diesel and pulled the engine out. It's a decent sized muffler. It probably weighs 15, 20, maybe even 25 pounds. But it sounds really good. It's solid. It can take some abuse. You can run into stumps or whatever, get hit with gravel, and They don't come apart at the seams. You know, they can get hot, and they're just a tough muffler. They sound really good, just good tone. When you really put it to the floor, they're pretty loud, but just cruising. You know, in overdrive at 65, if I'm not pulling anything, you can't even hear the truck run. It's like dead quiet until you put, you know, the pedal back down again. Then you get a pretty hellacious roar out of the rear end. So I like that. I like to be loud when I want, but when you're cruising, it's just kind of quiet, which for me, I don't really care. I like it loud when I'm cruising too. But this is kind of a family truck, you know. My mother uses it. I use it. When my little brother gets older and gets his license, he'll be using it to run my drunken ass down to the store for more beer. So, you know, and I'm not anti-police, but I like to just be left the fuck alone, especially by the police. And when I was 16, 17, oh yeah, get pulled over and be a smart ass with the cops because you know they can't do anything about it. And they really can't, but you get a little bit older and it's like, I just want to get where I'm going and get home. I don't want to fuck with the cops, man. So that was why I chose the muffler that I did. The 10th thing I like about this, and I know this might be a little bit confusing because it was the 5th thing that I didn't like about this truck, but the transmissions. Now I'm going to probably get back in the truck like this. The 46RH is substantially better than the 46RE for multiple reasons. They're just a lot more reliable. But it all really comes down to the kickdown. Say the AOD transmissions and the E4ODs in Ford, in my experience, and even like the C4s and C6s, well, mainly the C4s, because that was a small block transmission. The C6s seem to kind of, they don't kick down as easy because they were more paired up with stuff like the, the 400, well, not really the 400M. It's a 351M, which is really similar to the 400. Some people call it the 400M, and then some people will fucking crucify you for calling it the 400M. So there's that. But I like the C4s and the AODs and the E4OD Ford transmissions. For the most part, they were paired up to 302s and 351s. They can rev way higher than any of these Dodge engines. And not only that, but they make, the higher the rev, the more horsepower and torque they make. It's like they just, the torque curve just keeps on climbing, which is nice for a certain job. For what I do, I like the Dodges a lot more. The engine doesn't have to work as hard to get momentum. But at the same time, out on the highway, that's when that's when having a lot of torque at high end is really nice. When I was coming back up north from pulling the snowmobile and the Bolins and all that, we loaded up at about 35, including myself, probably 3,600 pounds. And I'm not going to get into all that shit because there's it's like 18-minute video at this point. It's going to be probably closer to 25. But I had to slow way down. There was a bunch of people passing me. I was only doing 65. Bunch of people passing me. Couple cars come on the expressway, and I don't know what the fuck they were thinking, but they slammed on their brakes. Well, not like slammed on their brakes, but slowed way down getting on the highway. So, of course, I had to slow way down behind them. Well, and then they went to pull over, and I'm like at the bottom of this hill. And then I'm looking up towards the top of this hill, and I just came down from the top of the hill. And in my rear view mirror up there, about a quarter mile back, there's a semi hauling fucking ass. And I kind of forgot where I was. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this semi's hauling ass. They can't stop very quick. So I had to get in the passing lane and put my foot right to the floor. Well, where you'd kind of, like a 302, that would have kicked right down immediately. Or, well, not a 302, but a transmission paired up to like a 302 or a 350 would kick right down into first immediately and send the RPMs way up, which in that truck would be just fine. But with the 360s, you can't really do that because once you get really above 4,000 RPM, in first gear, it wouldn't really matter. You're going to make so much torque to the rear wheels in first gear that it doesn't really matter. I guess the idea that I'm trying to get at is these transmissions, although they don't seem to play with the engine quite as well as the AODs and the Ford transmissions of this era did, they do pretty well. You really can give it quite a bit of throttle. You know, if you had an AOD hooked up to this truck, it would kick down way too easy and you'd lose a lot of torque. This, although like I said in my last video, I wish you could give it more throttle without it kicking down. It really... Dumbass. Well, anyway, you get the idea. The thing I like about these transmissions is that they play along with this engine pretty well. And you can build them. They're really not that expensive to rebuild. Yeah, the seats work. I've already been through that. So that's about it for this video. It would have gone a little bit longer if I hadn't been interrupted, but that's about it. So thanks for watching.